It's one of the greatest stories ever told.
They changed the world countless times.
How four boys from Liverpool went from an underground club...
Everybody was just crazy about them.
...to top of the British pops.
I loved it when I did woo, and then my hair went shaking all over the place.
Before conquering the planet.
The Beatles are the biggest thing that ever happened in pop music.
In just 8 short years, the Beatles caused a revolution.
They were magic for nearly a decade.
With groundbreaking sounds.
The Beatles did it their way.
Trend-setting fashions.
They were the kings of the 60s.
And a fab sense of humour.
And the rest of you could just rattle your jewellery.
Over the next 2 hours, we'll celebrate the band that ripped up the rulebook and made Britain cool around the world.
They absolutely have to be the world's #1.
But just what is the nation's favourite Beatles #1? There was John, Paul, George and Ringo.
Hello, Beatles.
The Beatles scored an astonishing 27 chart-topping singles in the UK and the USA.
I think they went for it fearlessly and created some of the greatest songs of all time.
Tonight, we'll tell the untold stories behind those songs with a little help from their friends.
It was an extraordinary thing to be in that car.
With clips never seen before on TV.
We said we can't show that. It makes them look like real people.
And exclusive access to the original recordings.
They would only add something to make it better, not just for the sake of it.
So get ready for the results of our exclusive ITV poll and a chance to see the Beatles like you've never seen them before.
The biggest, greatest band that ever lived.
They appeal to all ages.
The greatest songwriters of all time in my eyes.
And we begin our countdown with the last of the Beatles' 17 UK #1s. Spring 1969. The QE2 ocean liner was making its maiden voyage to New York. The Apollo 10 spacecraft was orbiting the moon. And John Lennon and his new wife Yoko Ono were on their own personal crusade for world peace.
Ballad of John and Yoko was a specifically storytelling song, almost in the sort of mode of old folk songs. About someone's life and what they did.
Every record is a time capsule of where they were at a particular time, and the Ballad of John and Yoko was, of course, about John and Yoko getting married.
Finally made the plane into Paris, honeymooning down by the Seine. Peter Brown called to say, you can make it okay, you can get married in Gibraltar near Spain. Christ, you know it ain't easy.
It was like their diary.
You know how hard it can be.
John and his great peace mission.
The way things are going, they're gonna crucify me.
And the bedding in Amsterdam.
Drove from Paris to the Amsterdam Hilton, talking in our beds for a week.
There were John and Yoko in their night clothes, holding white tulips.
We're only trying to get us some peace. Christ, you know it ain't easy.
We all got the message. It was peace, peace, peace. And of course, the Ballad of John and Yoko followed.
The way things are going, they're gonna crucify me.
John Lennon rang up Paul and said, look, I've got this idea for a song about his life outside of the group, actually, with Yoko Ono. And that evening, Paul wanted to record it.
Last night the wife said, oh boy, when you're dead, you don't take nothing with you but your soul.
The other two Beatles were abroad, so Paul McCartney plays the bass and the drums and the piano. John Lennon played both guitars and sang the main vocal.
Newspaper said, she's gone to his head. They look just like two gurus in drag. Christ, you know it ain't easy.
Imagine someone doing that now.
You know how hard it can be.
Imagine, you know, the Ballad of Jay-Z and Beyonce. Brilliant.
They're gonna crucify me.
Day Tripper is a great song and a great riff. It was like the first riff I learnt on a guitar.
The tambourine in there, it kind of had a little Motown thing to it. And then that roll is really, really fast.
Got a good reason
Pretty amazing.
for taking the easy way out. Got a good reason for taking the easy way out now. She was a day.
Recorded in autumn 1965, Day Tripper was written by John and Paul with the hope of landing their third Christmas #1 in a row. Well, it worked.
And I found out.
They're staggering in their simplicity, Beatles songs. But it's the melodies on top of it are brilliant.
She's a big teaser. She took me half the way there.
But the way they hang their melodies round those chords is, particularly the early stuff, the pop stuff, is staggering.
She was a day tripper, one-way ticket, yeah. It took me so long to find out, and I found out.
Day Tripper is a great song. I think it had a slightly different meaning as you got older, but at the time it made me think of just like you could sort of hop off school for the day, get the train in from Deptford into Charing Cross or something. But I think it might have referred to people sort of going on a trip for the day, probably without having to leave their own homes, by taking newfangled drugs, quite frankly.
Well, whatever that song was about, the Beatles were certainly a band who knew how to have a good time. In fact, these four likely lads could unite the whole nation with laughter.
They were very funny, very witty, the four of them, actually. John Lennon probably most famously.
Like this one-liner that has gone down in Royal Variety show history.
For our last number, I'd like to ask your help. Would the people in the cheaper seats clap your hands? And the rest of you, if you just rattle your jewellery.
There's just something so infectious about seeing, particularly in those early days. It just looks like they're enjoying every moment.
You got a word of advice for somebody who's starting out in show business?
Do your best, you know. That's great.
I think the humour was a very, very important part of their appeal. Right from the start, they were clever, they had little wisecracks whenever they did press conferences and all that sort of stuff.
You want to get a haircut at all?
No. I had one yesterday.
I did a television show with him, and I said, well, I'd like to have a go at this pop singer myself.
The only thing is I'd have to change my name, you see. I'd have to have a name like Cliff or Rock, something earthy. Well, I don't know, eh?
Cliff Dodd.
Yeah.
What about Sod?
Sod. They were still able to be four Liverpool lads having a lark.
Hello, Eric.
Hello, mate.
I remember you. You're the one with the short, fat, hairy legs.
No, he's the one with the short, fat, early leg.
We're the ones with the big, fat, hairy heads.
Get out of that. Hey! What do you like being famous?
Well, it's not like in your day, you know.
What? No, what do you mean, not like in my day?
Well, my dad used to tell me about you, you know.
In the old days.
I've only got a little dad, have you?
Back to the music now. And at 25 in our chart, the song that showed the Beatles could turn even musical accidents into hits.
They're in the studio, John Lennon just leans the guitar against the amp, and all of a sudden there's this really weird sound. And John goes, wow, what's that? And George Martin goes, feedback, John. And John goes, what, can we record that? Can we get that on a record?
Baby's good to me, you know, she's happy as can be, you know, she's...
And it wasn't just the music that was breaking new ground.
I feel fine coincided with the moment when their world popularity was so huge they could no longer satisfy those markets by going out and playing concerts. So they had to make these pioneering videos.
I'm in love with her and I feel fine. I'm so glad that she's my little girl.
This early example was filmed in Twickenham Studios. And the job of shooting it went to a 25-year-old filmmaker from Glasgow.
I actually was the first director to do promo video. I didn't know it at the time.
She's in love with me
My attitude was, let them do what they like. Ringo got in the bike, George singing into the punch ball. John actually suggested a ride putting a cigarette out, and somebody actually said, oh, we could pretend we've been to the lavatory. Their manager, Brian Epstein, said, stop it, be serious. He wanted to have them playing instruments and sing.
Baby says she's mine, you know she tells me all the time, you know she says so.
But Joe McGrath also filmed an alternative version. These pictures have never been seen on television until today, over 50 years later.
The Beatles got hungry during that take, and they sent out for fish and chips. So they sat down in the studio and started eating these fish and chips out of newspapers and chatting. So I said, just roll the cameras on it and put a track over it. Because Brian was there, and at the end of it, he came over and said, you can't show that. Makes them look like real people, like the Rolling Stones. They never showed it.
We're celebrating the most successful band in chart history, the four lads from Liverpool who unleashed teenage mayhem in the early 60s.
The whole thing was astonishing. There'd never been that kind of hysteria.
But what was it really like being there to see the Beatles?
You couldn't hear anything. All you could hear was us screaming.
I loved it when they did woo, and then my hair went shaking all over the place.
But it was just like the most amazing thing to actually be there and see them.
Everybody wanted a piece of the Beatles. Some were lucky enough to get it.
I started getting asked for bits of shirts, hair, fingernails. I drew the line on fingernails. I'd stand in the corner while George was getting his hair cut, and then I would pick it up and put it in an envelope. And sometimes I would get them to sign the envelope to say, like, this is Paul McCartney's hair.
In autumn 1963, a new word was invented to describe the phenomenon.
I was credited for coining the phrase Beatlemania. Expression came right out the top of my head after going to one of the very early Beatle concerts. The Mirror night editor picked Beatlemania out of my text and put it straight onto the front page. So Beatlemania was really born.
The Beatles' first single, Love Me Do, had been a top 20 hit in the UK, and the follow-up, Please Please Me, topped some, but not all, of the then different singles charts. But with Beatlemania on the rise, it would be a case of third time lucky.
From Me to You, I think it's an absolute breakthrough record. Had all the great trademarks of the Beatles, which were, at the time, bizarrely, harmonica, kind of nailed-on riff, and the combination John and Paul singing together.
If there's anything that you want, if there's anything I can do, just call on me and I'll send it along with love from me to you.
John's wonderful, harsh, kind of low tone, and that high McCartney harmony.
Inspiration for this, the first of the Beatles' 17 UK chart toppers, would come from the music press.
They're on tour with Helen Shapiro. They're on the tour bus and they're reading New Musical Express. And there's the letters page with people write in. So they look at that and then Paul and John, you know, go, wait a minute. And they start writing it on the bus.
It's less than 2 minutes long. So much happens in it. And the other extraordinary thing is that it uses a series of chords that you don't normally get in pop music. They're slightly jazz chords. And the trick was they'd written this really sophisticated song, but they made it very effortless and simple.
Welcome to the leafy London suburb of St John's Wood, and near this famous zebra crossing is an even more famous recording studio. Artists as diverse as Sir Edward Elgar and Kanye West have climbed these legendary Abbey Road steps. Oh yes, and these guys too.
The instant you walk into that studio, it's as if the walls are holding the history of everything that's gone on there.
It was here, in Studio 2, that the Beatles created many of the world's favourite songs.
The band would be down here on the studio floor, and my dad and the engineers would be up there.
I always find it interesting that a place like this is almost quite bland in its appearance. It's sort of beige and white. And I like that. I think part of the character of the room is the fact it is this box where musicians, like the Beatles, would paint their own colours on the walls.
And at 23, it's a George Martin-produced classic from Abbey Road Studio 2. 1966, and 4 years into their extraordinary chart run, the songs of the Beatles were bringing musical storytelling to a whole new level.
Based on a novel by a man named Lear. I need a job, so I want to be a paperback writer. Their lyrics were amazing. Sophisticated lyrics.
Payback Writer is at that cusp of the studios becoming this box of tricks that they would look forward to going to.
And we've exclusively accessed the original master recordings to reveal some of those tricks.
Paul singing one lead vocal and then double track himself, which is a very Beatles sound. Fair Jacques, obviously, is a French traditional children's song. I think it's John and George adding extra harmonies while Paul's playing bass.
Both Paul's Paperback Writer and John's B-side Rain were treated to lush-looking colour music videos, although their young American director found himself being asked some tricky questions.
John Lennon asked me which song did I like best. And so I was thinking, well, how do I handle this in a kind of diplomatic way? And then I said, well, gee, I think they're both just so great. And John sort of turned away from me because he wanted me, I think, to come down on one side more than the other because he was looking for bare truth. And he didn't want any polishing of the apple, as it were.
Our tour of famous Beatles landmarks continues in Savile Row, London, known for its tailors and for a remarkable event which took place one lunchtime in January 1969. Michael Lindsay Hogg was the director again, this time shooting the climax of the Beatles' final movie, and what would be the band's last ever public performance.
We almost didn't shoot the roof and let it be because George didn't want to, Ringo didn't want to, Paul wanted to very much. John didn't say anything at first. We had 11 cameras, we were ready to go. And then John said, let's do it.
Jojo was a man who thought he was a loner, but he knew it couldn't last.
I was lucky enough to blag my way onto the roof of Savile Row when they done their famous farewell gig.
Get back to where you once belonged.
Went up on the roof, and indeed, there were the boys. It was so exciting. Nobody had done that before, so, you know, it was like, oh, my God.
We were going to do a concert somewhere in the world, but we never could agree where the concert was going to be done. So I suggested that, since they wouldn't go and do it in Tunisia, or wherever the hell we were going to do it, is that we do it on the roof.
Get back to where you once belonged.
The thing which is wonderful about Get Back is that the Beatles were happy when they were playing on the roof.
To where you once belonged. Get back, Joe.
Whatever disputes had been between them in the past several months, playing together again for an audience, even though it was 2 stories below or on the adjoining rooftops, they felt like themselves again.
She was a woman, but she was another man.
I remember Savile Row is a fairly posh street.
Full of tailors, businessmen, directors, and they'd be looking up, thinking, what the hell is going on there?
The sound was turned up really loud. I'm sure somebody complained.
The police were so sweet. They were bobbies who were sort of thrilled to be up on the roof of the Beatles, except they had to close the show down.
One of the policemen came in, climbed up on the roof. He said, "Mr. McCartney, could you tell me how long you'll be?" He got through, I think, half a dozen songs. They got a lot of good footage. The police actually did nothing. I think they enjoyed it.
Oh, well, goodbye.
Even giants like the Beatles had their heroes. And in 1968, Paul McCartney decided to pay a musical tribute to one of his. 50s rock and roll piano legend, Fats Domino. With John Lennon lending Paul a hand on the lyrics, Lady Madonna was a song that Fats Domino would go on to record himself.
Lady Madonna, children at your feet, wonder how you managed to make ends meet.
Lady Madonna, definitely one of my favorites. It's very beautifully written. I like little things in the writing like rhyming suitcase and bootlace.
Friday night arrives without a suitcase. Sunday morning creeping like a nun. Monday's child has learned to tie his bootlace. See how they run.
The Fab Four played a lot of instruments, but they couldn't play everything, and Lady Madonna needed a specialist.
They hired Ronnie Scott to come and play tenor saxophone on it. He was one of the greatest musicians in this country.
And the boys accompanied this jazz great with their own brass section. Kind of.
It was John, Paul and George. Similar to the kind of sound that you get when you put paper over a comb.
See how they run.
Quite funny.
Lady Madonna, lying on the bed.
Lady Madonna has a particularly strong resonance with me because piano records weren't in the charts then. And suddenly this record came out that not only had a piano on it, but was like just what I wanted to play like. Paul McCartney is a brilliant piano player.
Tuesday afternoon is never ending.
But why in the promo video that came with the song is it John, not Paul, playing piano?
The reason for that is, the day they were meant to record that video, John Lennon arrived at the studio with a song called Hey Bulldog, and they got the instruments up and they started rehearsing the song and decided to record it then and there. When the film crew arrived, they were just told to film whatever they could, and they're actually filming the Beatles performing Hey Bulldog. They were so fast-moving and so looking to the next project that they just hadn't got time to produce a proper video.
If anyone ever needs basic education in the Beatles, I just point them to 1967. The album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the #1 single, All You Need Is Love.
All you need is love.
The double-sided single, Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields Forever.
Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to Strawberry Fields.
The EP Magical Mystery Tour.
I am the Eggman. They are the Eggmen. I am the walrus. Cuckoo-cuckoo.
And the Christmas #1, Hello Goodbye.
You say yes, I say.
For most artists, that would be a career. For the Beatles, it was 1 year.
I say go, go, go. Oh no. You say goodbye and I say hello.
People forget that Hello Goodbye was #1 for 7 weeks and one of their biggest records because they'd had such a huge year that people were still digesting Sgt. Pepper. So it was easy to not devote your full attention to Hello Goodbye, but it's a great pop record.
I say hi, you say.
But while 1967 was a stellar year, even by the Beatles' high standards, it also brought tragic news of the man who discovered and managed them since 1962.
Brian Epstein died.
And Paul seemed to be trying to be the one to hold them together. And when I look back on it, I can almost think of Paul in that position where the others are not being negative, and not in a bad way, but certainly their feelings were quite, I should imagine, confused. And he's trying to stay positive. When they're saying goodbye, he's going, no, it's hello.
Hello, Goodbye still sounds great. And it stops. And then starts again. All radio station owners are afraid that their listeners are going to stare at their radios and think either transmission has stopped or their sets are broken. So very rarely do they want to hear a record stop. But Hello, Goodbye got away with it.
Next in our search for the nation's favourite Beatles #1, it's a classic written but not sung by Paul, and one that would inspire an animated Beatles movie. It's Full Speed Ahead at number 19 in our poll.
In the town where I was born lived a man who sailed to sea, and he told us of his life in the land of submarines.
I like Yellow Submarine.
So we sailed on,
You know, it's a different thing. It's a different feel.
till we found the sea of green, and we lived.
It was ideal for Ringo, and I think so much of it, the appeal of it, is the way Ringo delivered it.
We all live in a yellow submarine, yellow submarine.
Ringo Starr was born Richard Starkey, the eldest of the Beatles and the last to join, in summer 1962, just months before their first hit.
Yellow submarine, and our friend.
It became tradition that Ringo sang one song on each album, and Yellow Submarine was written with him specially in mind.
Now, you could give it to John or Paul with a magnificent voice. It wouldn't be right. It has to be that every man's voice, which is Ringo.
We all live in a yellow submarine.
Yellow Submarine also played to the strengths of their genius producer, George Martin.
My father did lots of comedy records with Peter Sellers and Spike Milligan, and the Beatles loved this. They loved comedy. So when it comes to something like Yellow Submarine, the creation of sound effects of the sounds of a submarine would appeal to them all, whether we have voices through megaphones, chains pulled across the floor. It's fun.
And there's more fabness just around the corner. Anyone care to guess the next stop on our magical mystery tour?
Close your eyes and I'll kiss you.
Welcome back to the nation's favourite Beatles #1. It's February 1964, when plans were agreed to build a Channel tunnel. Cassius Clay changed his name to Muhammad Ali, and the Beatles were about to make musical history. America, here they come.
George, John, Paul and Ringo had found a new world to conquer.
They hit America like a lightning bolt.
It was the American thing that was absolutely dazzling. The way they'd just gone to America, everyone went absolutely mad. Never been a British group that had ever done that before.
And let's check out Ringo. Hi, baby, this is WINS, Wins on 1010. Ringo from the Beatles talking.
These accents with this different type of haircut.
Hello, everybody, WINS, there we go.
That whole thing drove the girls crazy.
I want to kiss one of them. I love them.
Wherever the Beatles went on this first US trip, future legends of documentary making, the Maysles brothers, were filming the madness as it unfurled.
Tomorrow night at 7, the Beatles read their own poetry on a documentary, Meet the Beatles.
Oh,
They're all over the world.
oh, really?
I don't get that.
I don't understand this.
Tomorrow night from 7 to 8, here it wins. Don't.
We ain't written no poetry.
Filter cigarette.
And part of the team at the heart of the action was a young English TV producer.
It was an amazing moment. We went in a limousine to the Ed Sullivan Theatre.
How are we going to get in then?
Girls were all lined up outside, kids hitting the windows and so on. It was an extraordinary thing to be in that
Timing also played its part, because the Beatles first arrived in America just months after a tragic event had shocked the country to its core.
President Kennedy had been killed. America was like a great wounded beast. And the Beatles came and gave America what they didn't think they were going to see anymore, which was kind of joy again.
Along came these young guys who looked different, sounded different, full of energy, hope, optimism. Well, of course we took to them.
And it's a song that topped the singles charts in America, but not back home, that's next in our countdown of the nation's favourite Beatles #1s.
8 days a week, it was a great part of a great album over here. First track, side 2, but there they took it off the album, released it as a single.
Need your love, babe. Guess you know it's true.
On their second US tour in 1965, the Beatles found the crowds had grown ever larger and wilder.
Hold me, love me, hold me, love me. I ain't got nothing but love.
And when they played at New York's Shea Stadium to a record-breaking crowd of 55,000 adoring fans, the Fab Four became the first band in music history to play to such an enormous audience.
I can say, girl, love you all the time.
The irony was that the Beatles were storming the States with their own unique take on the new sound of Black America, coming from labels like Motown.
Nothing but love, girl. 8 days a week.
The Beatles loved Motown and Stax and Atlantic and all those great soul records.
I love you.
On their early albums, the Beatles covered many American soul classics, which then influenced the songs they were writing themselves, like this one.
8 days a week, you can definitely hear the influence of Motown.
They always wanted to sound like a Motown record. It's always like grass is greener. They took the American influence and turned it around and made it very British.
It's really weird when you think about it, but here you have these English young men telling Americans that these American artists are great.
All the songs say Lennon and McCartney, but they're usually a John song or a Paul song, but sometimes they do really work together on one.
Try to see it my way. Do I have to keep on talking till
And that was true about We Can Work It Out.
while you see it your way? Run a risk of knowing that
I love the song, but I almost love it more because of that perfect example of them as a dream team.
we can work it out. Think of what you're saying. You can get it wrong and still
Paul is very optimistic, you know, we can work it out,
think of what I'm saying.
it's all going to be all right.
Work it out and get it straight or say goodnight.
And then you get John Lennon coming in the middle, who's like a bit more pessimistic.
Life is very short and there's no time.
You know, when I see that video now, and you're close on John, and he's singing the line, your life is very short. It's no longer just a statement that a pop star is making. It's a statement that's actually happened to him. But thanks to the magic of television, you can still see him looking young in the prime of John Lennon.
Try to see it my way. Only time will tell if I am right or I am wrong.
We Can Work It Out was yet more proof of the musical genius of the Beatles, a band always bringing new sounds to pop. This time, the novelty was John playing the harmonium, a kind of portable church organ, more associated at the time with early Coronation Street battle axe Ina Sharples. And when the Beatles made a TV special at Granada, where Corrie was filmed, the two worlds collided, with John playing Ina's actual harmonium.
They're lads that watch television and they love Coronation Street. Been on for 5 years by that time. He was delighted to do that, and it was a very good publicity point for us.
one of my definite favorites. It's the purest of pop, you know.
The Beatles were a band whose looks were as revolutionary as their sounds. To some, they were the original boy band, four good-looking lads with a unique style that set the trend for others to come.
I fell in love with them. Their hairstyle, the way that they were dressed, they were just so cute.
I have great affection for the early mop top thing.
Yes, even their hairdos sent the crowd wild.
Just let me hear some of that rock and roll music.
But it hadn't always been like that. In their early days at the Cavern, they looked like a down-and-dirty rock and roll band.
We just bought leather jackets, so it ended up we're all on stage with them. We'd always worn jeans because we didn't have anything else at the time. Yeah. So we bought leather pants and we looked like four Gene Vincents, only a bit younger, I think.
My mother never got over the fact that they were scruffy. She used to call them the Dirty Beatles.
That's why I go for that rock and roll.
We all loved it. We thought they were fantastic. It's like Elvis.
And that was it, you know, we just kept the leather gear till Brian came along.
'Cause baby, it's you.
But then manager Brian Epstein ditched the leather
Baby, it's you.
and put his new band into smart suits.
What I love now is that people thought they were so kind of scruffy. They look so sharp by today's standards.
My parents said, looked absolutely ridiculous, and that's what made it so marvellous, because the parents didn't like them.
Unlike other bands before them, the Beatles didn't settle on one look. As their music evolved, so did their style.
Beyonce will have, 44 stylists and hairdressers. Stuff. They didn't have anything. And they chose their own clothes, and they just sort of turned up in what they were turning up in,
As the 60s wore on, the Beatles' fashion would lead the world. Everything got ever more colourful. Hair got longer and started appearing everywhere.
A massive transition from that clean-cut, image they started with to the beards and the long hair.
By the end, they were cavemen. Like they were trying to conceal themselves behind bushes of hair. Maybe they were all trying to hide from each other by that stage, I don't know.
Time to return to our countdown now. And at 16, here's a place David Tennant knows only too well. The TARDIS.
You've got a television show, it?
Yes, we've travelled back in time to 1965 and a rarely seen clip of the Fab Four. On a classic British television series.
I'm gonna be sad. I think it's today. Yeah. The girl that's driving me mad is going away.
This is the only footage of the Beatles on Top of the Pops that hasn't been wiped. And this bit only survived because it was reused in this Doctor Who episode.
I had no idea you knew about the Beatles.
Of course I know about them. I've been to their Memorial Theatre in Liverpool.
Ticket to Ride was written mainly by John Lennon with a heavier sound in mind. He later said this track just might have been the start of heavy metal.
Ticket to Ride was kind of one of the early rock songs, I think.
She's got a ticket to ride. She's got a ticket to ride.
Ticket to Ride, that's an early example of the Beatles, the rock and roll band. It is a great guitar track.
But it wasn't just about the guitars. This was one where Ringo rocked too.
Ringo was always my favourite Beatle. It's the head bob. If ever you're going to mime drums, if you do that along at the same time, people know that you're doing Ringo.
Miming was never a problem for Ringo. But as for John...
A lot of the time, when John knows the camera's on him, he just would mug terribly and smile and just stop miming.
She's got a ticket to ride. She's got a ticket to ride. She's got a ticket to ride, but she don't care.
At number 15, an autobiographical chart topper from John Lennon.
It's full on when you're in a band under the microscope. And Lennon had a moment, and that was Help.
1, 2, 3, 4.
help was John calling for help.
Behind the upsounding music, John's lyrics hinted at the downside of global fame.
I think he was beginning to feel the pressure of the whole Beatledom thing. They'd not had any time off at all. Maybe a week's holiday in 3 years.
It was a treadmill which the Beatles were still able to cope with. But they were getting a little bit frayed at the edges by this time.
And now my life has changed in so many ways. My independence seems to vanish in the haze. But every now and then I feel so insecure.
It's like one of those songs that a man can apply to his life, a woman can apply to their life, a child. And we do it, and we do that with song.
Help was the title track of the band's second film.
And at that time, the movie Help and everything, it seemed to me that they owned the world.
The feel of the movie's famous Alpine sequence was recreated for one of Joe McGrath's promo films, but on a much smaller budget.
The link was just that bit of paper snow, and Ringo with an umbrella. A lot of paper was swallowed.
At this midday session at the Cavern, we proudly present the Beatles.
Welcome back to our celebration of the Beatles and to the Cavern, a club in Liverpool where they played almost 300 times before conquering the world.
The Cavern Club was a unique place. There was something magical there.
First time you ever come down the Cavern, you just never forget it.
And then I saw the Beatles, and I just thought, wow.
The Beatles were only captured on film at the Cavern once, and this is it, a performance of Some Other Guy, shot by 25-year-old Granada TV director Leslie Woodhead.
There was a sense that there was something extraordinary going on in Liverpool with all of these kids playing rock and roll. And I was absolutely blown away by what was going on there, which was the Beatles in full throat doing their thing. Such overwhelming energy. I could feel it coming up through the soles of my feet and into my stomach. There was something really special going on there.
Just 6 weeks after this performance was filmed one August lunchtime in 1962, the rest of the country would get its first taste of the excitement when, in the same week as the first Bond film, Dr. No, the Beatles' debut single was released. And it's the song that's been voted number 14 in our exclusive countdown.
Love Me Do was just like the opening of the doors for the Beatles. It's like signifies when everything changed.
Love, love me do. You know I love you. I'll always be true.
I bought it straight away. I didn't have a record player, but I just wanted it in the charts.
Love me do.
An awful lot of Cavernites done the same. They didn't have record players.
Love me do.
But other Cavern regulars weren't so sure.
Love me do.
Love Me Do had been all over the Merseybeat newspaper, which was the Bible in those days. And suddenly it was going to be a hit. And that's when we started to feel a little bit threatened.
Love me do.
Hang on, we buy this, or if they get famous, they'll leave the Cavern, and what will we do then?
Someone to love. Somebody new.
There was stories about people saying, don't buy it, you know, they'll get famous. But I couldn't resist. I worked over the record shop as well, so I couldn't resist, could I?
Love, love me do. You know I love you. I'll
Love Me Do stalled at a modest number 17 in the UK charts in late 1962, but that was only the beginning of the song's chart success.
It wasn't a #1 in Britain. It was a #1 in America, but that's because when the Beatles broke so massively, all of the tiny companies that had the rights to the earlier Beatles singles put them all out again at once, and they were all hits at once. And so, in the first week of April 1964, the Beatles had the top 5 in America.
Love, love me do. You know I love you.
And they then had another #1 creep in, which was Love Me Do.
So please, love me do.
The Americans didn't know it was out of sequence, but they were eager to buy anything by the Beatles, so it was taken to #1.
Before the Beatles captured American hearts in 1964, they had begun a lasting love affair with Europe too, as this German TV footage shows.
Auf einem kleinen Bahnhof bei Hamburg zum letzten Mal verlassen die Beatles ihren Sonderzug, der sie während einer Tournee durch Deutschland trug.
And the story of the next song in our countdown begins when the boys reluctantly agreed to re-record some of their hits for the German market.
Come to me. Du nimmst mir den Verstand.
After recording new vocals for Sie liebt dich and Komm gib mir deine Hand in Paris, the band still had an hour left in the studio. That time was put to good use, recording the chart-topping classic that's number 13 in our poll.
Makes you feel alright. I don't care too much for money.
The Beatles were a rock and roll group. They were a fantastic rock and roll group. But they invented their own version of it, and it was like an incredible version of it. When I heard those records, I sort of just got that excitement.
I don't care too much for money. Money can't buy me love.
Can't Buy Me Love was so different from everything that went before. You thought, wow. You knew it was the same band because you recognised Paul's voice. That was the astonishing thing. Every single was different.
Say you don't need no diamond ring, and I'll be satisfied. Tell me that you want the kind of thing the money just can't buy. I don't care too much for money. Money can't buy me love.
Ken Scott was the engineer on many Beatles hits and would go on to work with stars like David Bowie as a producer. But in 1964, he was a starstruck junior employee at EMI Records.
I first started at Abbey Road when I was 16. I was a huge Beatles fan. Within a couple of weeks, I had in my hand this box. I happened to notice that the name at the top was the Beatles, and I saw 2 of their songs, but the titles were in German. And then there was another one I'd never heard of called Can't Buy Me Love.
I don't care too much for money. Money can't buy me love.
I had the tape in my hands before anyone had ever heard it. It was amazing.
Can't buy me love. To lead a better life, I need my love to be here.
By 1969, the Beatles family of John, Paul, George and Ringo was expanding.
Hello? How are you?
Ringo had married hairdresser Maureen Cox. George had tied the knot with model Pattie Boyd. And in March 1969, Paul and photographer Linda Eastman left a London registry office as man and wife. A week later, John's marriage to conceptual artist Yoko Ono in Gibraltar would see all the members of the band enter a new phase of their lives. And it was an era reflected in the song that's number 12 in our countdown. George is said to have written it for his wife Pattie, and its promo video featured the 4 happy couples.
That song just has always touched me since the first time I heard it.
Attracts me like no other lover.
It just has everything that makes a perfect song.
Something in the way she
It just comes at you from all sides and just take over your emotions.
don't want to leave her now. You know I believe in how.
Something was a landmark song for the youngest Beatle, George Harrison. After 7 years of Lennon and McCartney hits, this was his first to be released as a single.
But I don't need no other lover.
George was a great songwriter, but the other two were like typewriters. You know, if they didn't write a song in 10 minutes, they'd throw it away and start another one.
Don't want to leave her now.
George spent a lot of time getting his right because he knew he had to present it to those two. It wasn't until 1968, 69 when he had a long time in India to write an awful lot of songs.
You're asking me where my love grows. I don't know. I don't know. You stick around now, it may show. I don't know. I don't know.
What a beautiful song. What an absolutely beautiful, dazzling song. And of course that guitar bit, whenever you hear that, it's kind of shiver up the spine.
Artists as diverse as Elvis, Shirley Bassey and Liberace have covered Something, although not everyone had all the facts at their fingertips.
It's just funny when Frank Sinatra used to perform it, he used to say this is one of Lennon and McCartney's greatest songs.
Something was released as part of a double A-side. And next in our countdown, the song that was on the other side.
It's the bass line, man. It's just pumps.
Come Together, for me personally, stands out. There's so little going on, but so much sound.
The feel of the music, the groove, it sounds so contemporary when it opens.
Here come old flat top, he come grooving up slowly. Got juju eyeball.
The words that come together is so great. What a great poem, like a modern, it's like a beat poem.
John Lennon always had that weird sense of humour.
To be a joker, he just do what he please.
And that ability just to go off into this made-up, crazy world.
What is it about? What is a mojo filter? What is a juju eyeball? What is a walrus gumboot?
Walrus gumboot, he got
What is a spinal cracker?
he want. Spinal cracker, he got feet down below.
I like this. You've no idea really what the song's about.
Hold you in his armchair, you can feel his disease. Come together right now over me.
And the other extraordinary thing about it, which I only discovered recently actually, is it's a live recording. They had several takes of it, but what you hear is the four of them playing absolutely live in one take in the studio. Phenomenal musicianship.
Come Together is a great song. It was just so different. And you never could figure out where the Beatles were gonna go.
Our magical trip through the incredible career of the Beatles continues in Liverpool, their home city, where tourists still flock to see where it all started.
OK, guys, step right this way.
And among the main attractions, the homes where the four boys grew up.
We're in number 9 Madison Street, and this was the birthplace of Ringo Starr.
George's childhood address would stay with him throughout his career.
Arnold Grove was a name that George used to use when he was signing in and out of hotels. That was his alias.
The homes of John and Paul have been restored by the National Trust, to how they would have looked when they were boys. John lived here on Menlove Avenue for 18 years. And this is the very porch where John and Paul practiced their vocals.
They'd sing Elvis's Blue Moon in there and try to recreate the harmonies of the Everly Brothers. There are songs which are definitely known to have their genesis here in the house. They are What Goes On, I'll Get You, Hello Little Girl, or perhaps most famously of all, Please Please Me.
Nearby on Forthlin Road, Paul's house was where some early Beatles songs got their first hearing. One of them, She Loves You, performed to an audience of one, Paul's dad, Jim.
Jim listened and he said, "It's great, I like it, but I'm not so keen on the Americanisms in the chorus. Can you change those?" So Jim wanted, "She loves you, yes, yes, yes." He didn't like the yeah-yes, a bit too American at the time for Jim.
From its debut in Paul's front parlour, She Loves You would go on to take the world by storm. And it's number 10 in our countdown.
The first Beatles record I bought must have been She Loves You. It sounded so fresh.
It was like the teenage girl anthem. Everyone would jump up and down and sing. It was so brilliant.
You've lost your love. Well, I saw her yesterday. It's you she's thinking of. And she told me what.
Great idea for a song, isn't it? Talking to somebody saying, no, 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 no. You're all right. She loves you. That can't be bad.
She loves you, and you know you should be glad.
They changed my world in so many ways because suddenly it was a group and they sang their own songs. And that was a revolution.
Now she says she knows.
Because it made so many like me think, maybe I could too.
And you know that can't be bad.
Maybe I should.
The other thing about it was that it brought George Harrison, very significant, to the front line. George Harrison sings nearly all the way through it, and that became part of their signature. The fact that they could sing three-part harmonies.
No, it's up to you. I think it's only fair. Pride couldn't hurt you too. Apologize to her because she loves you, and you know that can't be bad.
I attended the party that George Martin threw on the occasion of the release of his very last album, and She Loves You came on. I noticed there was a fellow dancing up and down in the corner, and I looked a little bit closer, and it was Ringo Starr. When it was over, he said, "Great record." Well, who can disagree?
You know you should be glad.
At number 9, a song recorded in just 3 hours at Abbey Road.
The next song we'd like to sing. It's called All Day's Night.
And with one of the most famous opening chords ever.
Guitarists around the world have tried to work out what chord that is. And the reason why they haven't done so is because it's not just a guitar that's playing. A piano is being hit. If I just play the electric guitar, you have this. It sounds like Hard Day's Night, but it's not. It's just a chord. If I play all four, 2 guitars and 2 pianos, you get the depth of that chord.
It's been a hard day's night, and I've been working like a dog. It's been a hard day's night.
John Lennon wrote A Hard Day's Night with a little help from one of his friends.
It was one of Ringo's little funny sayings. He just said, "It's been a hard day's night."
John looked at him and said, "That's it. That's the title we want."
Ringo's saying also gave us the title of the Fab Four's first film, nominated for 2 Oscars and setting records in the first week of its release in Britain.
I thought they were very funny in the film. I thought they were naturals. And they found an identity in the film which was very real. It was sort of like, yeah, they were the boys I knew. That's fantastic.
They didn't get them to play roles they weren't comfortable with. They were basically playing themselves. It was a very clever thing for them to do.
I should be sleeping like a love, but when I get home to you, I find the things that you do.
Ringo and his character is really well captured in that film.
Now, you've got inferiority complex, you have. Yeah, no, that's why I play the drums.
Paul's cheeky chappy, everybody's friend feel is also brilliantly caught. And John's rather sardonic feel.
How did you find America? So I left to Greenland.
And George has allowed a few rather wicked asides.
What would you call that hairstyle you're wearing? Arthur.
For its Liverpool premiere on July the 10th, 1964, the four international movie stars returned home to a reception even wilder than those in the film.
200,000 people were in Castle Street and Dale Street alone. When they opened the doors to go out onto the balcony, the noise was horrendous.
And here they are. Just listen to those screams when the police are having a pretty tough time. It's certainly one of their hardest days, nights.
Looking out and just seeing the whole street just full. That's when I realised they were famous.
At number 8, the last of the Beatles' amazing run of chart toppers, an undoubted classic, but one which splits opinion to this day. In April 1970, the same journalist who'd been following their progress since the days of Beatlemania broke the news that the greatest band in history had decided to go their separate ways.
From a journalist's point of view, it was a great scoop, but it was kind of sad in many, many ways because we travelled the road a long time, and as Paul wrote, it was the end of the long and winding road. We'd reached it, and I knew we'd reached it.
The long and winding road that leads to your door.
The Long and Winding Road is the most outstanding record.
Will never disappear.
The melody, the voice, haunting vocal, magic.
I've seen that road before.
But by the time it gave the Beatles their 20th US #1 in June 1970, the band were no longer together. And even this song was cause for dispute.
The Long and Winding Road is a very strange story. First of all, the artist had no idea that it was going to sound like what it sounded like, because Phil Spector got it.
Its writer Paul McCartney had no idea that Maverick producer Spector had been brought in. His task? To tidy up the unfinished tracks that George Martin had originally recorded for what would become the Let It Be album. And this was how it sounded when Phil Spector first got hold of the song.
Leave me standing here. Let me know.
Long and Winding Road sounds better with a piano and very little else.
Many times I've been alone, and many times I've cried.
Because it's a real personal song.
Anyway, you've always known the many ways I've tried. But still,
So to put all that Spector rubbish on it was wrong.
to the long, winding road.
Paul rang me up one day and said, they've taken it to America and they've given it to Phil Spector. And they put heavenly choirs and all sorts of soupy strings on it, on my songs. He was furious.
A long, long time ago.
I got a call, could you come and do an arrangement for this song, The Long and Winding Road? I started off quite modestly, you know, with 6 violins and 3 violas for each other.
Lead me to your door.
But then I kept getting calls from Phil saying, oh, I'd like a few more violins, a few more strings, some brass and some horns and some harps and even a choir. And I thought, oh, yeah. So I did it.
And then the final snap was that EMI said, well, we wouldn't have my name, on the album, because Phil Spector had now produced it. And I said, let's have a compromise. Why don't you say, produced by George Martin, overproduced by Phil Spector? But they didn't go with that.
You left me waiting here a long, long time ago. Don't leave me standing here. Lead me to your door.
The story of the next Beatles #1 in our exclusive countdown begins here in London at the family home of Paul McCartney's then-girlfriend, actress Jane Asher.
Paul was living at the time in our guest room. One particular day, John came over and joined him. They were down there a couple of hours, and then Paul stuck his head up the stairs and asked if I wanted to come down and hear what they were working on, what they'd finished. They were sitting side by side on the piano bench, both hammering away at the piano, and played I Want to Hold Your Hand for the first time to anybody anywhere. You kind of go, you know, am I going mad, or is this just about the best pop song I've ever heard in my life?
Oh yeah, I'll tell you something I think you'll understand. And I say that something I wanna hold your hand.
Landing UK #1s was becoming business as usual for the Fab Four. This was their third in 1963 alone. But I Want to Hold Your Hand also started to climb the American charts, and so by early 1964, it had conquered the Billboard Hot 100. Just 7 weeks earlier, they were performing this song on Granada's local magazine show. Now the Beatles were playing it to what seemed like the whole of America.
In the first week of February, they appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show to the largest television audience to date, which was 73 million people.
I did see the Beatles play the Ed Sullivan Show, and it was amazing. I fell in love with them. We were all saying who liked who. I like Paul, I like John, I like George. I like Ringo.
The feel of I Want to Hold Your Hand, it was like something that came from the moon.
When I touch you, I feel happy inside.
It was very, very, very different.
It's such a feeling that I love. I can't hide.
It was more than just the song itself that was making them so popular. They had look, personality. There was something about them that kids just gravitated and loved.
I think you'll understand when I say that something. I wanna hold your hand.
It was so quick, it was so deep, it was so impactful. And during the year 1964, they had 25 hit singles in America.
Next, we're moving on 3 years to 1967 and the great Beatles album that got away.
Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to Strawberry Field.
The Beatles decided to make a concept album
Nothing is real.
about their life and the early days in Liverpool. The first song for it, which Paul wrote, was Penny Lane, and then John wrote Strawberry Fields Forever.
But sadly, the Liverpool-themed album was not to be. Instead, the two songs were brought together for what many consider the greatest double A-side ever. It's amazing to think that this classic combination was the first Beatles single for 4 years not to reach #1 in the UK. But Penny Lane's slice of Liverpool life did strike a chord in the States, where it reached the top of the charts. And tonight, it's #6 in our countdown.
Penny Lane, there is a barber showing photographs of every head he's had the pleasure to know, and all the people that come and go.
Penny Lane is such a beautifully crafted song.
On the corner is a banker with a motor car. The little children
Every little bit of it, and so catchy.
and the banker never wears a mask in the pouring rain.
Really fantastic production as well.
Penny Lane is in my ears and in
It was bus terminus, Penny Lane, in South Liverpool, where we all lived.
beneath the blue suburban skies.
And we'd all sort of meet at Penny Lane to go to places.
Penny Lane, there is a fireman with an hourglass, and in his pocket is a portrait of the Queen. He likes to keep his fire engine clean. It's a clean machine.
All those beautiful images of the people in Penny Lane captivated Americans' imaginations. And they think of, and I honestly mean this, Liverpool as some exotic place with all of these wonderful images, because the Beatles made these images come to life.
Penny Lane is in my ears and in my
50 years on, tourists still flock to see the places mentioned in the song.
Where we are now is at the very top end of Penny Lane, and just over on the other side you'll see the famous things that the Beatles sang about.
Find the shelter in the middle of the roundabout.
The shelter in the middle of the roundabout where Pretty Nurses sold poppies from a tray. Just over to the right you'll see the bank, where the banker never wore a mac in the pouring rain. And just a little bit further up is the famous barber shop.
Penny Lane, the barber shaves another customer. We see the banker sitting waiting.
I used to live just behind Penny Lane Hill.
And the fireman rushes in.
I spent many, many months, years of my life walking up and down Penny Lane.
Penny Lane is in my ears and in
It brings a tear to one's eye, all this. I thought it just captured the atmosphere there.
beneath the blue suburban skies. I sit and meanwhile.
All You Need Is Love was their great imperial moment because it was written especially for this television show, Our World.
Broadcast in June 1967, this was the first TV programme to be beamed around the world by satellite.
Good evening. This should be a moment in television history because this programme will bring together more places throughout the world than has ever been possible before.
19 countries provided performances, and representing the UK were the Beatles with their latest single live from Abbey Road.
I remember watching this as a kid, and what was so exciting was we were told this was going to be a global broadcast. The entire world was going to be watching.
The next 2 hours, everything will be live, no film or recordings.
It's a commission, really. Can you write a song, whole world going to sing? And only the Beatles would have accepted that terrifying challenge. Probably only the Beatles would have succeeded.
OK, Jeff. Yep. All right, here we go. OK, Richard. Here comes the take. Watch it.
I felt really nervous on the Beatles' behalf. You know, I remember watching it live and thinking, what do they feel? The whole world's watching. And eventually the camera alights on John Lennon, who, if I remember rightly, had his hands on his headphones and his eyes shut and was completely self-possessed.
Nothing you can do that can't be done. Nothing you can sing that can't be sung.
And was chewing gum.
Nothing you can say, but you can learn how to play the game. It's easy.
And I can remember thinking, this is how cool are the Beatles?
Nothing you can make that can't be made. No one you can save that can't be saved. Nothing
The broadcast came just as the summer of love was in full swing,
easy.
with a song that summed up an era of optimism.
All you need is love.
Love used to be talked about a lot in the 1960s. There should be a better way of living than everybody just cooperating with each other.
All you need is love.
And the Beatles are very influenced by that.
Love is all you need.
In the build-up to this moment of history, fellow Cavan graduates, the Merseybeats, were allowed a rare glimpse of the Beatles at work in the studio as the song came together.
They'd done the backing track, love, 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 love. That's all they had. And they said to us, what do you think? And what did you say? Well, I like the words.
But then Paul kept popping his head outside and said, "John, have you written any lyrics to this song yet?" And John said, "We've got 2 days. It doesn't go out live till Friday."
Nothing you can know that isn't known. Nothing you can see that isn't shown. There's no way you can be that isn't where you're meant to be.
Here's this ultimate sing-along song. It was uplifting and it meant something and it really worked.
I just felt so incredibly proud that this wonderful band were performing a breathtaking song and representing our country. I thought, I bet all the other countries in the world are probably a little bit jealous, actually.
All you need is love. All together. All you need is love. Everybody.
At number 4, it's the McCartney classic from the Revolver album that topped the singles charts in 1966 as a double A-side with Yellow Submarine.
What I loved about Eleanor Rigby is the fact that you followed her journey and they made her feel very real.
Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice in the church where a wedding has been.
It's so heartbreaking.
Lives in a dream, waits
It's verging on poetry.
wearing the face that she keeps in a jar by the door.
It's a poetic lyric, but then it's got a massive punchline.
All the lonely people,
All the lonely people, where do they all come from?
do they all come
Oh, it's a lyric of a lifetime, that.
all the lonely people?
Eleanor Rigby is very unusual. It's the first time that the Beatles didn't play any instruments on their records.
Father Mackenzie, writing the words of a sermon that no one will hear.
What they did is they recorded a double string quartet. And my dad talked to Paul about it and listened to Bernard Herrmann. Now, Bernard Herrmann was a famous film composer who is famous for Psycho. As the woman is attacked in the shower, there's
All the lonely people.
there's an incredibly aggressive sound, and it's almost like a 24-year-old Liverpudlian saying, I want a string quartet to sound like this, and using my dad as a translator for that.
Paul has said that the name Eleanor Rigby came from combining the names of actress Eleanor Bron with a Bristol wine shop. But intriguingly, a stone's throw from where John and Paul first met in 1957, this gravestone can be found.
Died in the church and was buried.
The majority of fans love the idea that there is a true Eleanor Rigby, so they're not that particularly bothered if Paul says it's to do with the actress Eleanor Bron. They still want to come and see this grave in St. Peter's Church.
It's strange to have a number one that is only string quartet and vocal. And it's just the thought of being able to come into studios, tear out the rule book, break the mold, and then move on to something else was just very Beatles.
Welcome back, as we're nearing the end of our incredible journey to reveal the nation's favourite Beatles number one. And we're now into our top 3 and the epic title track from the Fab Four's final album and film, based on a dream Paul McCartney had about his late mother, Mary.
When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And in my hour of darkness, she is standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be.
Paul has said the dream came to him during a difficult time in the band's history, when Mary appeared to him saying, "It will be all right, just let it be."
Whisper words of wisdom, let it be.
The dream that he had about his mother, I can imagine him having an experience like that. It's quite mystical, isn't it?
There will be an answer, let it be.
When she died, it was like a big, big thing to him. He was very, very close with his mum. The fact that he wanted to put that into music, trying to sort it out some kind of creative way through a song, that's very him.
Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. Yeah, there will be an answer, let it be.
They allowed men to be able to go, you know what, this is okay to be emotional, to talk like this. We've a lot to thank them for.
They wrote those songs, the kind of early anthemic songs that we all wanted to get behind and put our hands up in the air and say, yep, that's part of me.
It just sounded very spiritual, like a gospel song.
It's very kind of stripped back, simple way of delivering that message. It says all it needs to say, and there's just no need for elaboration. It pretty much sums up how to deal with any situation when you're really struggling.
This would be the final single released before Paul McCartney left the band, and the Beatles were no more.
Let It Be has a finality to it. It almost sounds like the song for the credits at the end of the film.
We're now just one Beatles classic away from the end of our countdown. And at number 2, the most recorded song in pop history. 3,000 cover versions so far and counting.
Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away. Now it looks as though they're here to stay. Oh, I believe.
Yesterday's one of those songs where you could have taken it a number of ways.
Suddenly,
ultimately had to be stripped back.
not half the man.
I had to just sing to you, like, you know, like a lullaby.
There's a shadow hanging over me. Oh, yesterday came suddenly. Why she had to go, I don't know. She wouldn't say. I said something wrong, now I long for yesterday.
It's got a very identifiable sentiment.
Yesterday, love was such an easy game to play. Now I need a place to
We're all slightly yearning for what's gone by.
Oh, I believe in
It's a beautiful song that connects with people.
why she had to go, I don't know. She wouldn't say.
Just like Let It Be, this was another song that came to Paul in a dream. And another song born at the family home of Paul's girlfriend, Jane Asher.
He woke up with the song in his head, finished, the melody. He assumed it was a pre-existing song.
Now I need a place to hide away.
My mum remembered him wandering down to breakfast, as it were, saying, "What is this song that I've got stuck in my head?" She said, "It's very nice, but I've never heard it before." And it eventually dawned on him that he'd written it in his sleep.
Yesterday's a really special song. Just can't imagine a world where the song doesn't exist.
Thank you, Ringo. That was wonderful.
Thank you, John. But the time for joking's over as we reach the end of our journey through the extraordinary career of the Fab Four. It's finally time to reveal the song ITV viewers have voted as the greatest Beatles #1 ever. Tonight, we've enjoyed songs that summed up the 60s, songs of pure genius, songs that changed the world, and at #1, it's an anthem that's moved millions of us since 1968, a 7-minute epic, written by Paul for John's son Julian. Prepare to sing along with the nation's favourite Beatles, #1.
Hey Jude, don't make it bad. Take a sad song and make it better. Remember to let her into your heart. Then you can start.
John Lennon loved that song because it was written for Julian. It was Paul's way of saying, I know your parents have divorced, but things are going to be okay. What a present to give to someone. And it was a beautiful gift in our lifetime for us.
And anytime you feel the pain, hey Jude, refrain. Don't carry the world upon your shoulder.
The song has open arms in the way that it's saying, don't worry. You know? You want to sing it with each other and to each other, whoever you're with. It's one of the true pop anthems. It's one of the oldest and greatest.
But recording this great pop anthem wasn't all plain sailing. The first 2 days spent on it at Abbey Road were caught on camera. Great for us now, but not at the time.
There was a film crew in. Typical of a film crew, they said, don't worry, you won't know we're there. Well, we did. They were in everyone's faces. Everyone was quite irate. We finished up not getting anything.
So let it out and let it in.
It eventually took 6 days to record Hey Jude, the longest time needed for any Beatles single. It would also be the longest Beatles #1. A running time of over 7 minutes meant the band were breaking yet more rules.
Back then, radio was 2.5, 3-minute songs. Don't think anyone thought that Hey Jude would get the amount of play that it did get, but it was the Beatles. Who's not going to play the Beatles?
When the Beatles premiered the song on the David Frost Show on ITV in September 1968, this was a real TV occasion. And for the big sing-along chorus at the end, director Michael Lindsay Hogg decided to pull out all the stops.
We realized that just being on the Beatles for the 4-minute closing chorus wouldn't sustain. And so Paul and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to get people in as an audience to represent the world? Housewives, students, certainly multicultural.
They just sang the song, and when they got to the na-na-na part, we all had to run on. I was about 2 people away from Ringo and singing my heart out. It was a once in a lifetime. It's a really lovely memory.
Nothing beats the end. When it's the big sing-along, hands in the air. And at that point as well, if you've got a room full of people, it doesn't matter if they can sing or not. If they want to shout along, that works.
If you don't join in on Hey Jude, there's something wrong with you.
I love it, that never-ending na 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 na.
The legacy is their music. Those songs that we all join hands and sing along to at the end of a night. God bless the Beatles.
It's now over 50 years since the Beatles first came, saw, and conquered the world. Today, sadly, it's a world without John, a world without George. But the legacy of the greatest band in history remains as strong as ever.
To go from Love Me Do to Hey Jude in 7 and a bit years is staggering. Yeah, it's staggering. I've had holidays longer than that, do you know what I mean?
The Beatles are the Shakespeare of popular music. There's a quality and there's a longevity to what they did that will outlast all of them and all of us.
Their songs will go on and on and on. Like the music of Mozart, it'll stand the test of time because it's so unique.
You listen to a Beatles record and generally it'll make your day a little bit better. They've given the world a huge amount of enjoyment, and it's as simple as that.
On behalf of the band, I'd like to thank everyone in the UK for their continuing love and appreciation for our music. Our early success was all down to your wonderful support, and we have never forgotten that. Thank you. Paul, you're up next.
Hello there. This has been a great program, and I'm very happy to be part of it. I can't believe that after all these years, people are still listening to the Beatles, still playing the music, and I send my best. Have a great one.
Peace and love.
Well, another act has got to go this weekend. Your vote decides, live from 8 on Saturday and Sunday. It's The X Factor. Next tonight, Sean Bean stars in a new drama, The Frankenstein Chronicles, exclusive to ITV Encore. And on ITVB, it's the new series of The Only Way is Essex. Next here, the latest ITV News at 10.